Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As a very quick introduction, so I'm part of Standard Chartered's clean energy sector coverage team, and what we do is twofold. One is we work with a lot of corporates and financial investors, advising them on equity investments in the whole of clean energy space, so renewables, hydrogen, batteries. And we also use our own balance sheet to also lend to a lot of these projects across multiple markets, and India is a very, very core market for us. Very excited to be here on hydrogen. Just one point before I move into the financing considerations is hydrogen has been used for a very, very long period of time, right? Refineries have been producing gray hydrogen for 40, 50 years. The whole excitement that we are seeing around hydrogen, especially in the last 12 months, is because of the word green, right? Green is really the buzzword when it comes to hydrogen today. And when we say green, it effectively means renewables hydrogen, right? So the crux of green hydrogen is renewables. And that is one aspect that, there's a lot of focus on many other aspects when it comes to green hydrogen. But really, renewables aspect of green hydrogen is very, very important to take care of. If you set up a 1 MTPA green hydrogen project today, the amount of renewable energy needed by a guesswork is 25 gigawatts. So today, India already uses 6 million tons of gray hydrogen. Effectively, if you were to just substitute that with green, you have a 150 gigawatt renewable energy requirement, which is 50% higher than today's current installed capacity itself. So people do talk about end use cases and, more end use cases, but itself that challenge is very, very big because just to set up a 1 MTPA, you need 25 gigawatt worth of renewables. And 70% of the capex for a hydrogen project actually comes from renewables. So just 30% comes from electrolyzer or, balance of plant system. So everyone in the room knows the Achilles heel of hydrogen is your offtake price, right? The cost of production compared to gray hydrogen. And the only one of the biggest way actually it'll come down is if you bring down the renewables cost. Everyone says renewables has come down a lot in India to 2 rupees per kilowatt hour, but it has to come down further if you were to make green hydrogen even more competitive, right? And there are multiple manners in which you can make your offtake price more competitive. One is obviously you localize a lot of manufacturing and what people on the panel have said around PLI. So today the country is largely dependent on imports, but if you localize your solar module, your wind turbines, your electrolyzers, you obviously bring down the cost a lot. And second is the financing aspect to it, right? Because ultimately when you go and finance these projects, 75% is debt funded. So the cost of financing becomes very important. And that is where I think we'll have to be very innovative. So one of the key ways is, whether you look at a project on a offtake which is local or export. So if you're looking at an export project, you will obviously move into sort of a dollar offtake structure. And dollar offtake means dollar financings, which today is used in India, but not to as much extent as you can really use. And as everyone knows, the dollar debt financing tends to be very, very cheap compared to your local currency financing. And if you just move from a local currency financing to dollar financing, and there is no hedging needed because your offtake is dollars, that's how most hydrogen derivatives are traded today. You actually can reduce your renewables cost just by 30% just by moving the financing from a local currency to a dollar financing. So, these are the two aspects, localization of manufacturing and innovatively thinking about the financing, which itself can bring down your cost of hydrogen. And I know, brighter minds are thinking about it, but that's the two key steps in my view that needs to be really taken off. The end use is already there up to 6 MTPA in the country, right? Even if you were to target just 50% of it as viable, you still are at 3 MTPA, which is 75 gigawatt worth of renewables today. So that's the, the key point around financing from an offtake perspective that I wanted to lay out. Second is also in terms of how hydrogen as a product is seen, right? If you look from an end user perspective, hydrogen is classified more as chemical, whereas all your capex is incurred on day one like renewables, right? So you have a 25-year capex fixed spent upfront, Whereas most of the commodities on chemicals is traded in the spot market, right? LNG contracts don't tend to be 25-year contracts. Ammonia contracts don't tend to be 25-year contracts like we have got used to in renewables industry, right? So, and that is where, it's almost like a chicken and egg situation that uh, for a project to be bankable and to be financed, whether it's an equity investor or a lender, you need long-term sort of contractual cash flows as we see in renewables. Whereas if you're an off-taker, and the typical off-taker like, your ammonia users or hydrogen users like the refineries or fertilizers, they actually don't buy on 25-year contract basis. They actually buy it on 3-year or 5-year off-take basis. So it's a very big psychological change which needs to happen, and that's where the government policies, government subsidies, contract for differences, there are various policies which people are thinking of, mandatory purchase obligations. So these needs to come into place where the off-takers also then move from a paradigm of, buying ammonia or hydrogen for 3 years to buying ammonia and hydrogen for 25-year fixed price contracts. And that's where you will see sort of the demand and supply sort of also matching through, and then these projects then become reality. Today, everyone is discussing, but it's still a discussion board. I think, on the off-take strike and the off-take structure is the other aspect which really needs to be resolved for these to be sort of become bankable per se. In terms of financing, there is another aspect is around the structuring of these transactions. So, what we are seeing worldwide, not just India, is that there are 3 business models which are developing of how hydrogen projects will get developed. So one is, a typical chemical company, you might have heard of players like Air Products, Air Liquide, who don't specialize in renewables, but who specialize in hydrogen. So what they are doing is they're setting up standalone electrolyzer manufacturing capacities, and then they're going to sign renewable offtake purchase agreements, desalinated water offtake agreements, and then they will sell the produced hydrogen or the ammonia to an end user. So it's a standalone electrolyzer manufacturing facility. The financing for that will be much smaller because the electrolyzer component is going to be very small of an overall capex. The second business model is a integrated renewables, desalinated water and electrolyzer project, which a lot of people in India are planning, the Adanis, the Reliance, everyone, where the same project will have the renewables, the desalinated water, the electrolyzer, and then they will send the end product. The third business model, which we are now seeing in Europe, is the end use is also part of the project. So green steel, for example. So we are actually financing a fairly large green steel project in Europe where one of the large steel producers is producing the renewables, is set up the electrolyzer, and the steel, he's also setting up a steel manufacturing plant on DRI basis, direct reduced iron, which will use the hydrogen to produce green steel. So your end product is actually green steel and not hydrogen or ammonia. So your whole issue around logistics, transportation, storage goes away. So it's very interesting in terms of also the structures that people are thinking about hydrogen, how to mitigate the risk around transportation, logistics, storage. And my view is even in India, you will see different business models coming up. It will not be one standard model that every player will use. It will depend where people's expertise are, partnerships evolve. So I'll just take a pause there. Just on SEB side, on hydrogen, we are actually financing one of the first commercial scale hydrogen project in Saudi Arabia right now called the NEOM Solar Project. Some of you might be aware, which is being sponsored by Air Products, Aqua and NEOM. So it's a 1.2 MTPA green ammonia project, and we are leading the transaction. What is interesting is the different liquidity pools which we are seeing for hydrogen. So I think investors are really keen to invest, both lenders and equity. I think what really needs to be is that there is a commercial case and an offtake agreement there. And we are seeing commercial banks, local banks, export credit agencies, whole host of DFIs, MLBs coming through. The debt is like 8 billion in a single project, and we are almost closing that financing. So there is enough liquidity out there. People do want to invest here, but on the, really on the offtake side and the cost side is what the focus has to be. Thank you.